So I want now to introduce our clinical professor of Sanskrit here at Loyola Marymount University, Professor Zoë Slatoff. And Zoe did her BA/MA at Columbia University, her PhD at Lancaster University in the UK, and is the author of a wonderful book called Yogavataranam, Learning Sanskrit Through Texts of Yoga. So welcome, Zoe.
Dr. Chappell, thank you all for being here. I just want to talk for a moment about where this idea came from. I went to a poetry slam, a non-Sanskrit poetry slam. I think this might be the first, but hopefully not the last. And I went to a poetry slam in the fall, and I just thought it was so much fun, and felt really inspired by it, and didn't quite know what I wanted to do with that, but just sort of felt this inspiration. And then I was teaching my advanced Sanskrit students, some of whom are here tonight, and I was needing to write some quizzes, and they were needing to take some quizzes, and we all decided that it would be a great idea to do away with that, and instead write some poetry. And so they wrote some verses. Some of them are original verses, some of them are translations of other verses, of English verses, of Chinese verses. And as they will explain, and as I will explain, it's no easy task to write Sanskrit poetry. And so I'm going to begin by giving a little bit of an introduction to Sanskrit poetry, hopefully that everybody can understand whether you have studied Sanskrit or not, because I know we have a somewhat mixed audience. So I will start with a little introduction, and then we will get to our poems. Just to make sure I can get to our poems. Yes, okay. So I want to sort of start by just kind of talking about where this fits in. So Chandas, or the metrical science or prosody, is one of the Vedangas. So if you know the word Ashtanga, right, the 8 limbs or auxiliaries or supplements, these are the supplements to the Vedas. The other ones are phonetics, grammar, etymology, ritual instructions, and astrology. And like with everything Sanskrit, they like to make rules for things. So we'll be talking about some of these rules. And this word, chandas, this metrical science, prosody, it comes from a root chud, chund. In general, nouns in Sanskrit come from verbs, meaning to please or delight in. So metrical science, meter, verse is meant to be pleasurable. It's meant to be delightful. It also, because all Sanskrit words have many meanings, means a wish, a desire, a fancy, a will, a pleasure, free will, meaning, intention, the Vedas themselves, pleasing, fascinating, inviting, alluring. And so we hope that our verses will be all of these things. And we'll be talking today about classical Sanskrit. But before classical Sanskrit, there was Vedic Sanskrit and Vedic chanting. And Vedic chanting used pitch accents. And pitch accents sort of have these different marks and rules according to which syllables go up and which go down. Again, this is not what we're focusing on today, but I just want to sort of contextualize it. And just to show you a chant you may be familiar with, this chant from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And I'm going to chant it, and you'll notice, I'll try to move my hand, you'll notice these marks below and these marks above that sort of indicate where the sounds go. Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. As you'll notice, every time we get those vertical lines, right, my voice, and thank you for those who chanted with me. I know all my Sanskrit students know this one. Your voice goes up. And so when you hear Vedic chants, you'll always hear them chanted in this way. And with Vedic chants, pronunciation is very important. If you pronounce them wrong, you could have molten lead poured in your ears or all kinds of horrible things like that. So we have to be careful about the Vedas. We cannot write Vedic poetry. And one last thing about Vedic meter, it was systematized in a sutra system like the Yoga Sutra, and this is called the Chanda Sutra, the Sutra of meter, of prosody, written by Pingala. And he categorized meters into 7, which were also called birds. We're getting a lot of poems about birds. So poetry and birds, they seem to go together. The main one we will be focusing on today is Anushtubh, which is basically the same as shloka meter, which you will hear me talk a fair bit about. But as I said, we don't want to really get too involved with Vedic meter here. What we want to talk about is classical meter. And in classical Sanskrit meter, instead of pitch accents, there are stress accents. So what does this mean? Each verse is called a padya, and each verse is divided into 4 padas or quarters. And I will explain what this means when we look at a verse for those who are not familiar with this. But we generally have 4 padas. The word pada also means foot. So these verses have 4 feet. And the majority of verses are regulated by this thing called vritta. And in vritta, the number and positions of syllables in each pada are organized in certain ways. So what we'll be talking about here today is samavritta, where all the padas are basically the same. There is also Ardha Samavritta, where alternate padas are the same, and Vishamavritta, where they're all different. But most of the verses that we'll be reading, we'll also get some other poetry too, so I'll let our poets explain. But most of the verses we will be looking at are this Samavritta, equal padas. There are other kinds of verses that are regulated by jati. This has to do with a sort of different organization of syllables into matras, where a short syllable is 1 matra, a long syllable is 2 matras. For those familiar with the Sankhya Karika, it is written in a jati meter, which is why it doesn't follow the rules that most of us are used to. And so to situate this Anushtubh or shloka classical meter, I want to tell a little story, or to let the text tell a little story. And this is the story of the first verse, the first shloka. So before then, there was no poetry. I mean, there was, but there wasn't shloka meter like this. And this is from the Ramayana. And its author, Valmiki, was out wandering in the forest. And he saw a hunter, kill 2 croucha birds in the act of mating, which is a terrible thing, right? This happens in other texts too. It happens to Pandu in the Mahabharata, where 2 deer are killed, and it's sort of, it's a theme. But here he doesn't actually Valmiki doesn't kill the croucha birds himself. But he sees this hunter, and what happens? He cries out, "Mani shara pratishtam tvam, agamash shashvati samaha, yat krancham mitunadekam, avadi kamamohitam." Right? "Oh, hunter, you will not attain the glory of eternal years, since you killed one from this pair of croucha birds while infatuated by desire. I should note these are all my translations, unless otherwise noted. And what happens after that? He says, oh, what did I just say? You know, what just came out of my mouth? He says, this thing that just came out of my mouth, it is padabato, it is bound in quarters. Each of them have akshara sama. This is the samavritti we were talking about. They have equal number of syllables. They are capable of melting the strings of the heart, tantri laya. This is also sometimes translated as accompanied by musical instruments. This utterance that came forth when I was pravritta, I was afflicted by shoka, by grief, it shall be called shloka, poetry, nanyata, nothing else. So my shoka has become shloka. It works better in Sanskrit than in English, but we get the idea here, right? And what does this mean, bound in quarters? Every single shloka verse has these 4 quarters. Each one has 8 syllables. So this one, for example, Padabadukshara samas 8, Tantri laya samanvita 8, Shokartasya pravritto me 8, Shloko bhavatu nanyata 8. And so most of the verses we will be looking at here tonight fit into this meter. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but there are other rules about how these verses work. But first, back in the Ramayana, his students all got excited too. They all sang his verse, right? That very first verse, they repeated it. And we're going to ask you to repeat our poetry too. And they said over and over again, right? Sung by the great seer in these 4 padas with equal syllables. That shoka, again, from repeating it, has become shloka. And so then what happened? Valmiki had an idea. He had a little thought bubble here. I'm going to compose a whole poem called the Ramayana, just like this. And this is where the Ramayana came from. This is the story of where verse shloka came from. And most of the verses that most of us are familiar with, most of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, is written in this meter. Most of the Mahabharata, with a few verses in Trishtubh, which has 11 syllables per pada. So when we start to talk about syllables, I'm going to give you a very, very short Sanskrit lesson. For those of you who are not familiar with Sanskrit, these are our vowels. And they're made up of short and long sounds, and they are very much sort of organized in terms of where they are articulated in the mouth. So is short, is long, E is, so those are in the back of the throat, guttural. E is smiley. E is the long version. You'll notice they have a line on top. U at the lips, short. U, long. Re, also short. Ri, these are things we might think are funny vowels in English, but they are vowels in Sanskrit. And also lra, another very strange one that's almost never used. And then we get these other long sounds, A, I, O, ow. These guys actually aren't vowels. They shouldn't be there. But just make sure you're paying attention. These are long vowels. What do we do with this? So I just want to put this into context in terms of words that we might know, right? If we have a word like yama, yama is the first anga of Ashtanga Yoga, meaning restraint. We've got 2 short syllables, right? They each have yama, a short vowel. When you have 2 short syllables, you put the emphasis at the beginning, yama. We now have one with 3 short syllables, niyama. Niyama, right? If yamas are the restraints, niyamas are the observances. And so we again put the emphasis at the beginning, niyama, because they're all short. Then if we take one of my favorite mispronounced words, asana, right? People always say asana, right? Yes, my Sanskrit students are now cringing. You will cringe too. Asana, why? This is a long vowel at the beginning. So when there's a long vowel, you put the emphasis on the long vowel, asana. Similarly, mispronounced words, it is Ramayana, emphasis on the long sounds. Mahabharata. Another way to make a long sound or long syllable, which I'll talk about in a minute, is to have a consonant at the beginning and the end. So in namaste, we have na, but then our middle syllable is actually mus, and then te, the vowel, is also long. So na is the only short one, namaste. So we sort of build up in terms of the weightiness. Another one, vibhuti, superpower. Right, the long syllable here is bhu, so we put the emphasis in the middle. And another one, prithivi. The emphasis again goes on the long syllable, which here is at the end. And so I just want to point this out because as we look at our verses and as we've written our verses, this starts to become very important, right? And there are certain places where we need long syllables, certain where we need short syllables. A long syllable is called guru. The guru is somebody who is heavy, weighty with knowledge, right? The other one, lagu, is light. So a light syllable must end in a short vowel. Everything else is guru. Everything else is heavy. But we also, just to make life interesting, we have a bunch of rules for what a syllable is. A syllable must have one and only one vowel. It has to start with a consonant, unless it's at the beginning of a line or after sandhi. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. If you do, then worry about it. Because we're gonna do this again next year, hopefully, for those of you still studying. And you want to make the syllable as long as possible. So then we have some rules for shloka meter. And of course, there's even a verse for what these rules are, right? In shloka meter, the sixth syllable is always guru. It has to be heavy. The fifth syllable has to be lagu. It has to be light. The seventh, though, it alternates. This is the hard one, right? So the seventh is short in the second and the fourth pada, and it is long in the others. This makes for some very complicated situations. And even this verse, it follows this. I will point this out shortly, but this verse here, I have made the short syllables in blue and the long syllables in red. You will also notice down here, the short syllables are represented by this little semicircle, and the long ones are represented by these lines. And so, again, this seventh syllable is where it gets really tricky. And you will see that all of our verses follow these rules. And which means that you often end up saying something which is not what you originally meant to say, right? You have a very clear idea of what you want to say, and then it doesn't work. And so you have to, change it. And people always ask me, why do Sanskrit words have so many meanings, and why are there so many words in Sanskrit that mean the same thing? Well, this is one reason why. You want to have a lot of possibilities. And so I want to just look briefly at a couple of verses, and then I will hand the stage over to my students here and others. But a mantra that many of us know, the Ganesha mantra, you will notice this also follows those rules. Who knew? Right? All of these syllables. So we're going to chant this one. We'll do a call and response. I invite you to respond. And we always like to start with Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, god of beginnings. Vakratunda Mahakaya. Vakratunda Mahakaya. Surya Koti Samaprabha. Surya Koti Samaprabha. Nirviknam Kuru Me Deva. Nirviknam Kuru Me Deva. Sarvakaryeshu sarvada. Sarvakaryeshu sarvada. Give them new appreciation, right? And we won't go through chanting all of these, but I just want to point out even things like the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, right? It follows this same pattern. And I want to just show you briefly how complicated this is. It's very hard to split these syllables because they don't necessarily split where words split, right? So our word here is dharma kshetre, on the field of dharma, which is where we start. But when we split it into syllables, remember the rule, we want one syllable only, and we want to make the syllable as long as possible. So this R has to bump over here, dhar, and then the words are dharma kshetre, but because we want to make the syllables as long as possible, again, the K in kshetre has to bump over here, and so we get muk. And this, again, becomes shet, because this goes over here, and then we also want a syllable to start with a consonant, so they don't join. This one goes over here. But you'll notice these short ones, right? They have one syllable, they don't have a consonant after them, and they have to have a short syllable. So as we're going through these verses, you will see that hopefully, if we have done our jobs right, they all follow these rules. And I just want to take us back to our first verse ever, right? And it also follows these rules. Right. Maybe we should chant this one since it's the first one ever. So again, we'll do it. Call and response. Mani shada pratishtam tvam. Mani shada pratishtam tvam. Agama shashvati samah. Agama shashvati samah. Yat krauncha mitunad ekam. Yat krauncha mitunad ekam. Avadi kama mohitam. Avadi kama mohitam. All right, so I'm now going to put us into our original poetry. Bear with me for a moment. So it turns out that writing Sanskrit poetry is a lot of fun. I made my students do it first, and then they said I had to do it too. And it is my new favorite distraction project. You can spend many hours. I think Emily will testify and others will testify. You can spend many hours composing these little verses. So this is the one that was on the invite. This was my New Year's poem, Vrikshavanam. And again, this turned out to be, I didn't get to say exactly what I wanted to say, but I got to say most of what I wanted to say. So in English, the birds and the bees, Pakshi madhukrit, the bees are the ones who make madhu. Honey, flowers, pushpa. I kind of moved it around a little in English because I wanted it to kind of rhyme in both English and Sanskrit. So bija in Sanskrit is seed, I put them at the end in English, fruit, phala, lata, vine, or creeper. Take a little bit of poetic license. And yes, if the world is viparitam, upside down, see the forest in the trees, see the vanam in the Vriksha. And I'm always talking about this with my Sanskrit students, which is where this came from, is that when you're translating, you need to both look closely, which I call looking at the trees, and also you need to take a wide view and look back at the greater meaning and see the forest. So this is sort of my Sanskrit teaching poem. So let's chant it. Pakshi madhukritas chaiva. Pakshi madhukritas chaiva. Pushpa bijalatapala. Pushpa bijalatapala. Viparitam jagadchedi. Viparitam jagadchedi. Vannam vriksheshu pashyahi. Vannam vriksheshu pashyahi. And I will share one more, thank you. Right now, and then I will turn it over to our next person. I've got one more up my sleeve later, but I will do one more for now. And this one was inspired by the documentary All That Breathes. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's about birds in India and people saving these birds. So it's life itself is kinship, the breath is effortlessly the support. I took these lines out of this, not all of them. I think I added some, but a lot of it comes from that. Life itself is kinship, the breath is effortlessly the support. We're all a community of air. That's why we can't abandon the birds. And it was just such a beautiful idea that I had to, make it into a poem. And I think it was spoken actually in Hindi. So it's subtitled. So I actually should go back and see what words they used because my inspiration was the English. But I knew a little bit of Hindi. So let's chant it. Bandhuta jiva evasti. Bandhuta jiva evasti. Prana alambanam svayam. Prana alambanam svayam. Vayu sangovayam sarvam. Vayu sangovayam sarvam. Natya jemakagam stata. Natya jemakagam stata. All right. It is lots of fun. So I'm now going to turn it over to Dana, who is on Zoom. Hopefully, Dana, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, perfect. I will let you explain.
Awesome. Beautiful poem, Zoe. I love them. So I took this little challenge not as part of the class. I've already completed the advanced Sanskrit, so this is an extracurricular distraction that I had a lot of fun with, although as she's mentioned, it's quite challenging and was more of a distraction than I thought it would be. This poem is 2 verses, so we'll do one at a time just so you see the screen easily. And it was inspired by something that one of my yoga teachers in India said in a conference quite a few years ago, many years ago now, that always stuck with me. And actually, I've written a bit of poetry myself in English, and I always thought of it as something that I would make a poem, but it turned out to be a Sanskrit one. So it's Yoga Bhuvihi, the ocean of yoga. In English, just as the depths of the blue ocean indeed are not known from a ship, so too the fruits of yoga, O yogi, are not known through the body. Do you want to, I can chant this if you would like.
Yes,
Yes?
please.
Okay, cool. Shall we do call and response? Shall we try? Yes? Okay. Here we go. Yatha nila buvirgaha.
Yatha nila buvirgaha.
Manginya vidithanahi. Manginya vidithanahi. Tatha yoga pala yogin.
Tatha yoga pala yogin.
Vidita vigrahenana.
Vidita vigrahenana. So that was the first sort of setup. And here we have the resolution. So the yogi should always plunge into the deep water, indeed into the gifts of the ocean. May the fruits of yoga be revealed for you whose practice is immersed in wisdom. This one has some tongue twisters, so bear with me in the Sanskrit. Bridodgadha jale nityam. Bridodgadha jale nityam. Bhuvir vitaraneshu hi. Bhuvir vitaraneshu hi. Yoga palani suchantu. Yoga palani suchantu. Te bodhe magna sadhanaha. Te bodhe magna sadhanaha. Thank you. Beautiful. It's so fun to hear them sung. I love I feel like it goes with the ocean, plunging into the ocean to have that, have those sounds. All right, next up we have Laura Caulfield. Can you speak?
Yes, hello, hello. My goodness, I already feel so inspired listening to Dana and Zoe, your poetry. This is wonderful. Like Dana, I wrote 2 verses thematically around the same ideas. So my verses deal with topics of compassion and happiness in the heart and sort of experiencing our yoga in that way. And so this first section is called In the Heart, or Hridaye. And in English, it is, indeed, that greatest serene happiness from this point forward is seen as that vitality, beauty, and lightness in the heart always. Would you guys like to chant it? Yes, call and response, okay.
We are your chorus.
All right, wonderful. Sa ananda parashanto. Savananda parashanto. Drishyate tadata param. Drishyate tadata param. Eval jascha hi kantischa. Eval jascha hi kantischa. Lagavam hridaye sada. Lagavam hridaye sada. And so this is the second part, which just builds on that same idea. It's called imperishable love, Akshara Praman. And I just want to make a note, like some of these, it's like always like in English, sometimes you have words that you just like love. You like love the sound of the word. And in Sanskrit, I found that there are certain Sanskrit words that I just love the sound of the words. And Hridaye is one of those words, like the heart, that I love in the heart. And Akshara is another one too, imperishable. I love the sound of that word too. So I think I somehow had to unconsciously work those words into these verses. So the second one in English goes, there is no greater form of compassion in the heart, in the soul, and in the mind, but meditating on imperishable love always. And so let's chant it. Vidyate na param rupam.
Vidyate na param rupam.
Hridaye karunasyacha.
Hridaye karunasya cha.
Jive chitte tu vaidyayad.
Jive chitte tu vaidyayad.
Akshara premni sarvada.
Akshara premi sarvada.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Lucy with her little garden.
Thank you. So beautiful poem so far. And hello, I'm Lucy. I'm a student from Yoga Studies, and Sanskrit has been one of my favorite classes so far because it's precise, mathematical, and beautiful. And then you can probably already tell, right? So my full-time job is actually analyst. So in this poem, I'm combining all my passions, which includes gardening and numbers. Because the first time I got this assignment, I'm like, I need to write a poem, including all the numbers, right? So hidden or explicit, here we have one. I have a sweet small garden, that's one. It produces 3 meals, that's 3. For 2 of us, that's 2. And it harvests 4 seasons, and it offers millions of joys. So those are all the numbers I want to cover. It's a universe, right? 1, 2, 3.
Awesome.
And also a tip for you guys in Sanskrit, it's like kind of like we're very struggling, or I think the precision of the Sanskrit, even for nouns, they have like singular form, and then they have dual form or plural form. So even for 2 of us, it's not, I don't have to say it's 2 of us, but there is a specific word for like dual form of us. So it's very precise. I think that's a fun fact about Sanskrit. And with that, let's just chant it. Ma tu proshodhyanam.
Ma tu proshodhyanam.
Itli ni bojanani now.
Itrini bhojanani now.
Alpayati chaturtumscha.
Alpayati chaturtumscha.
Odi sukham chavindate.
Odi sukham chavindate.
All right, so the second one here, it's kind of like I thought about this when I meditate. So remember the blue sky, because the blue sky is always there. And the mind is like a blue sky. And thoughts are like a gathering of clouds. They pass and go, right? Good or bad, they don't stay. So just breathe, they'll drift away. And then I think there's a phrase here, if you want to remember this, and you probably know this already. So good or bad, or like happiness or suffering. So it's sukham, dukham. So I think if you want to remember one thing from this verse, that's a good thing to remember. All right. And with that, Mano nila iva kashash.
Mano nila iva kashash.
Chitani vaganau gascha.
Chitani vaganau gascha.
Sukham dukham natishtanti.
Sukham dukham natishtanti.
Shvasihi hashravantika.
Asihi ashravanti.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Teresa, and I will let her explain. And you should be able to scroll down. It says here in person.
Yes, hi, I'm Teresa, similar to Lucy. I'm a student with Zoë in Sanskrit and a student in the yoga studies program. So I don't have much creativity, so I used the Chinese poem as my inspiration. And so this first one is by this really famous poet called Li Bai. He is a poet from the Tang Dynasty in the 8th century. And this poem particularly is one that's recited by most of the first grade students in China. So it's we can chant it in Chinese too later, maybe. So really it's saying that the luna beams bright in the bed, just like white frost on the ground. And I looked up towards the luna for remembering my home. Then we can try to chant it in Sanskrit. Prasho chatisha shi talpe.
Prasho chatisha shi talpe.
Yam shukla himam yata.
Yam shukla himam yata.
Aham shashinyu dikshami.
Aham shashinyati shami.
Chanudya yatnaya me graham.
Chaludyanaya vigraham.
So when I try to do this, I think the biggest challenge is the Chinese is very precise. So when we see, for example, one of the words here, the bumiam means deep. So it's really one syllable in the Chinese, but it's at least two syllables in the Sanskrit. And again, like shuklam, himam is really just one word in Chinese. So that was the biggest difficulty that I had. So for the second poem, I chose a much shorter Chinese poem. So this one is, as you can see, would be much shorter. So only 2 lines in the Chinese. So I chose this poem to translate because it talks about the lotus, and it's something that is very common in yoga and common in Indian culture. A great metaphor for tranquility and calm. So in English, it really means growing out of mud. The lotus blooms pure, rinsing in clear waters. The lotus become tranquil and calm. And then let's chant. Arupa kadamat padmam.
Arudha kardamat padmam.
Vishuddhatvam prapudyate.
Vishuddhatvam prapudyate.
Tattva shuddhajale padmam.
Tattva shuddhajale padmam.
Shantam gacchati nirvritam.
Shantam gacchati nirvritam.
Shall we also do the Chinese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes 出淤泥而不染，
Choose.
出淤泥而不染，濯清廉而不妖，濯清廉而不妖。
All right, so I'm gonna step back in here and present a couple of poems from people who are asleep or otherwise engaged. So this one is written by Jessica Greenfield, who is asleep in New York, who TAs my Sanskrit classes through the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, for those of you who have studied there, and who we are teaching a yoga and Sanskrit retreat together in Portugal in July. If anybody is interested, maybe we'll write some poetry. Anyway, her poem is about Kundalini. Kundalini is the coiled snake that sleeps at the base of the spine. The glorious Kundalini awoke from the practice of Bhujangasana. Now I want to drink prana. Indeed, your prana is sweet, her Kundalini talks. I'm going to read the second verse and then we can chant them. Give me the residue. It is suitable. You will become a dried up tree. We will all be born again, I think. She is subtle, resembling a snake. Some of you might recognize that last bit. All right, so we will chant this one on behalf of Jessica, who has been talking to her Kundalini and inspired. Shri Kundalya Prabhudishta, Shri Kundalya Prabhudishta, Bhujangasana sadhanat, Bhujangasana sadhanat, atta pranam pipasmite, atta pranam pipasami, sorry, I messed up, pipasami, te prano madurostihi, te prano madurostihi. Sorry, Jessica. Shesham me dehi yogyosti, Shesham me dehi yogyosti, Shushka vriksham bhavishyasi, Shushka vriksham bhavishyasi, Jani tasma puno manye, Jani tasma puno manye, Sukshma bhujagasam nibha, Sukshma bhujagasam nibha. That's Kundalini. All right, I'm gonna do one more of mine before I read the other person who can't be here. This I wrote in the last couple of days, sort of inspired by Kundalini. I wanted to write a poem on behalf of poor Prakriti. You're welcome. I appreciated it. I've been reading a lot of Sankhya Karika lately, and just very briefly for those unfamiliar with the Sankhya Karika, we have these two principles: Purusha, the male principle, the male soul or self. Each one of us has our own little individual Purushas, and then everything else is Prakriti, material nature. Purusha is male, Prakriti is female, and the text, the Sankhya Karika, talks about how she just exists for him. She exists Purushartham for his sake. At the end, she in fact does a dance and sort of takes a bow and, leaves because he doesn't need her anymore. But there's this idea that he can see and she does. She's blind and he's lame. And so this is on her behalf. But what's in it for her? If this whole universe exists for the sake of Purusha, he may see, but she's all that. Their association should be complementary. And thank you. I like this one. This one was fun. We've been talking about Samyoga. The Samyoga is this association joining in various ways. And if anybody's interested in the Sankhyakarika, just a little plug, I'm teaching a yoga philosophy class starting next week on Thursdays, 10:30 to 1. Anybody can join. And yes, more on the Sankhyakarika. But for now, we will chant this. Kim tasmin asti tasyaitu.
Kim tasmin asti tasyaitu.
Purushartham idam hi chet.
Purushartham idam hi chet.
Sapashyet satu tat sarvam.
Sapashyet satu tat sarvam.
Samyoga syat parasparam.
Samyoga syat parasparam.
Like this word parasparam, like one for each other. Oh, thank you. They did that at the Poetry Slam, the snapping. That was in fact how they introduced it. All right, one more I'm reading on behalf of Swami Ambikananda of Kali Mandir, who could not be here. But he translated Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem Brahma into Sanskrit. And interestingly enough, and he unfortunately is not here to explain this choice, but maybe he will tell me later, he's taken one verse and turned it into 2 Sanskrit verses. So they reckon ill who leave me out. When me they fly, I am the wings. I am the doubter and the doubt. I am the hymn the Brahman sings. So great verse to be translated back into Sanskrit. And what am I going to say about this? Oh, because he stretched it into 2 verses, there are a lot of what we call filler. So those of us familiar reading Sanskrit verses, people always ask me, why is there another cha means and? Why is there another he means and indeed? Why is there chaiva, and indeed, over and over again? It's to put the meter. Honestly, not always, but it's a big reason. And you don't really understand this until you try to write a verse. So we will sing his verses. Yo ma prujati shashpati.
Yo ma prujati shashpati.
Satu mityacha manyate.
Satu mityacha manyate.
Nirgalantiya dasamad.
Nirgalantiya dasamad.
Sorry, it should say, I didn't fix the Sanskrit. I didn't fix the transliteration. It should say te, otherwise it didn't work. It's got to be plural. That was a last minute swap. Asmi pakshav aham tada.
Asmi pakshav aham tada.
So sometimes you have to make things plural that you want to be singular, things singular that you want to be plural. We're going to go a little bit over time. I'm sorry. Maybe just like 10 minutes, I know, because we've got a couple more great things happening. I'll just sing the second verse. Aham asmi sandeha.
Aham asmi sandeha.
Sandeha van aham chahi.
Sande Aham Chari.
Yad Brahma Nahi Gayanti.
Yad Brahma Nahi Gayanti.
Teham Suktam Tadasmicha.
Teham Suktam Tadasmicha.
Great, thank you so much for being that. And I promise we won't go too far over, but we have a couple more great poems. Up next is Emily. And I will let her explain what she has done here, but another translation into Sanskrit.
Hello, yes, I was also in the Sanskrit 3 class, and I decided to translate John Donne's Holy Sonnet, what is normally categorized as number 14, into Sanskrit. And it's a sonnet, it kind of combines Shakespearean and Italian sonnets. So there are 7 verses total, but I just picked 2 fun ones, and also I still haven't finished the 7th verse. That was my goal for the semester. It did not happen, but I will finish it one of these days. So this is a fun illustration of Donne. He posed for his like death mask drawing before he was dead. So he like rolled up in his little sheet alive and was like, draw me. So I thought that was fun. He's a weird little dude. Oh, here, that's what it was. Okay. Awesome. So verse 1, I actually have a tattoo of this poem too. So it's one of my favorites, but the original one is batter my heart, 3-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. And I translated it below basically the same, but kind of with some of the grammatical things I had to do. This one was really fun when it comes to like compounds, and it took many, many hours to do this, but I kind of started with analyzing the grammar of the original verse and looking at where are my verbs, where's my subject, what's the objects, the direct objects, the indirect objects, where am I gonna have to make compounds, and kind of like mapped it out from there. And like everyone said, you really have to rearrange things so much. And you can't, it's like a good exercise in non-attachment, because sometimes you're like, oh, I really want to use this word, but you can't make it work. So you have to let it go and find a new word or a new compound. And yes, filler words are definitely our friends from this. So I'll go ahead and chant this first one. So Mridnihi hridayam devash.
Mridnihi hridayam devash.
Chatraya purusho hime.
Chatraya purusho hime.
Atatardaya shitvam tu.
Atadaya shivam tu.
Yatana vichikir shasi.
Yatana vichikir shasi.
And the next one I have, maybe.
Your arrow.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
There's my fingers.
This one, the verse is, reason your viceroy and me should defend, but is captive and proves weak or untrue. And I thought it was fun, since in English, you know, we don't have gendered words the same way a lot of other languages, including Sanskrit, do. I love that reason in here is a she, because there's a lot of metaphor throughout this piece that the 2 main like motifs throughout it are military motifs of being a town overtaken, and also a marriage motif, and so needing to be divorced in order to be anyway. So I liked that it was a she because it fits in with the kind of like divorce metaphor that's in here as well. So let's chant it. Ye natma shasitaram tu.
Yenatma Shasitam tu.
Raksheyam Chetanam Mama.
Raksheyam Chetanam Mama.
Yadyapi Sanritam Deva.
Yadyapi Sanritam Deva.
Paraguptam Chadurbala.
Paragurtam Chadurbala.
So that's all I have, but if you're interested in more, let me know. I'm happy to share the other verses.
I would like to see all 7. I've seen all 7. Well, I've seen 6.
Yeah.
All right, so we are now kind of done with the shloka portion, and we just have a couple of other verses. Abhishek Jain is going to share his, which is not shloka meter, and he will tell you about it. Because I don't know. Let's move this out of your way.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. So here on the left side, difficulty in expressing love. So this is a inspiration from a song in Bollywood. So that song comes from the movie. There's a Bollywood movie as well called Bodyguard. And the name is actually Bodyguard. It's not the, I'm translating in English, but the name is Bodyguard. It has some inspiration from the Hollywood movie Bodyguard. So there's a song, and my friend back in the days, I'm talking about some 2007, 8, 9. I was in my senior high school and a little bit undergraduate, first year of undergraduate studies. And my friend and I was translating all these songs, and one of the songs got stuck in my head, was always this. And there were many other songs. So it's about a couple, those who are in love are trying to express their love somehow through words. Okay. So the first one is, I'm gonna sing it in Sanskrit, and using the Bollywood rhyme. Twadiyam madiyam madiyam twadiyam prem katha jatilam. Sorry, it's actually jatila. Prem katha jatila bhavati. Again, dual. Dvau shabdor madhye katham na bhavati. Twadiyam madiyam madiyam twadiyam prem katha jatila bhavati. Dvau shabdau madhye katham na bhavati. So it is difficult to express love with these two words, or I love you. It doesn't say anything. I mean, maybe in English it makes some sense, but for Hindi speakers, we don't have any expression to express love. People in India, North India, South India, everyone says, I love you, I love you. But for them, it is hard to feel those words in English. And in Hindi, we don't have those phrases. So that's the problem here, and difficulty in expressing love. Coming as someone who grew up in Indian culture, I understand that pain so well. Maybe in English-speaking world, or where people speak English, it's easy to say I love you, but it doesn't have the same kind of feeling in India. Okay, so the other one is actually the praise to teacher. You know, the teacher is everything. You learned Sanskrit when you came to LMU. You probably never heard of Sanskrit. Maybe you knew some mantras out of fascination, but throughout this course, the whole 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, whatever years you have spent, spending, you learn Sanskrit, you learn yoga. So there's a certain tradition around the world where especially in India. I studied there. I also studied in Europe. So I have so much devotion to my teachers, and this is the one. Praise to my teacher. I will translate, but first I have to sing it first. So I'm gonna read from here. I remember all here, but okay. मनसि वेद ज्योतिर ज्वालय हे गुरो शरणं त्वं हि मदीयं मह्यं ज्ञानं देहि विभो शरणं त्वं हि मदीयं मह्यं ज्ञानं देहि विभो देव त्वमसि यदि भाग्यविधाता यांचा मदीया बहु बुद्धि प्रदाता मनसि वेद ज्योतिर ज्वालय हे गुरो शरणं त्वं हि मदीयं मह्यं ज्ञानं देहि विभो. So the first line here, Manasi Veda Jyotir. So as someone who knew nothing but learned from teacher, and now I have out of devotion to teachers, oh teacher, I translated here, it's my rough translation. Oh teacher, illuminate the flame of knowledge in my mind. Manasi, so in my mind or in mind, you can add my Sharanam Twamahi Madiyam. Almighty treasure. Vibho at the end. So, almighty treasure, because gurus know a lot. The word guru means heavy. That means they are full of knowledge. They're filled with all sort of knowledge. So yes, so there Vibho, almighty treasure, you are my refuge. Kindly give me knowledge. And then third line, Deva Tvamasi Yadi Bhagya Vidhata. You are divine. Deva Tvamasi, you are my divine. And Bhagya Vidhata as well. So Bhagya Vidhata means also the builder of my fortune. In that, provider of intellect, Yancha Madiya, Buddhi Pradata. So Bahu Buddhi Pradata means provider of the intellect. And so that's what I have. So
All right, and on the theme of the teacher, let's figure it out where we are. Last but not least, we have Dr. Travel sharing a poem written by his teacher. So.
Okay, we'll sing the bottom first. I'll do a line, you do a line. As I walk in the yoga path,
As I walk in the yoga path,
I think of those who paved the way.
I think of those who paved the way.
They sought after truth and rent the veil.
They sought the truth and rent the veil.
The veil that is called Maya.
The veil that is called Maya.
Yoga will guide me, yoga will yoke me. I want to know the truth. Yoga will guide me, yoga will yoke me. I want to know the truth. I must be patient, I must be humble. Its journey won't be long. I must must be patient, I must be humble. Its journey won't be long. Its journey won't be long. So after my first semester of Sanskrit, my teacher asked me to translate this song into English, which I did, and it's somewhere in my notebooks, but I had to redo it for this occasion. And it was also a moment to sort of rethink the lyrics. And as the months and the years went by, we moved away from the Vedanta language that you see in the word Maya. So when I rendered it into the Sanskrit, I said things just a little bit differently in the Sanskrit. So this is not metered as the beautiful meter that you all went through, but I think you'll be able to follow along. The big thing is that the yoga me nayishyati, yoga me yogishyati, okay, they go together, satyam yasyami. So yata yoga marge charami, yata yoga marge charami, tata gurudevyaha smarami, tata gurudevyaha smarami, satyakama drishtva, satyakama drishtva, klesha karma nivrittihi, klesha karma nivrittihi, akurvan margam mahyam,
Akurvam margam mahyam,
yoga me nayishyati, yoga me nayishyati, yoga me yogishtati, yoga me yogishtati, satyam jitnyasyami, satyam jitnyasyami, kashanti bhavayam, kashanti bhavayam, amanitavam bhavayam, amanitavam bhavayam, yoga yatra nabahu kala, yoga yatra nabahu kala. Again, yoga yatra nabahu kala. So yata as I walk charami in the yoga path, yoga marge. Then, and there in the yoga path, smarami, I remember with homage to the Gurudev, as Abhishek said, the Guru is God. Drishtva, and who are these people? Drishtva, having seen and having made real that satyakama, the desire for truth, klesha karma nivrittihi, they brought an end, a nivritti, to klesha karma. So that's instead of rent the veil of Maya. Then what did they do? A kurvan, they made mahyam, for me, the path, the yoga path. And yoga will guide me, yoga will yoke me. Jijnasyami, I want to know satyam, the truth. Bhavayam, I must be kshanti, I must be patient. Bhavayam, amanitava, I must be humble, I must not make it all about me. Yogi yatra nabahukala, its journey won't be long. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. I was gonna take us down a whole other path, but I'm gonna save it for next year. I was going to talk about Trishna meter, where there are 11 syllables per pada, and there are whole other patterns for how that works. But yes, we will hopefully put a bookmark in that, because that was such a nice note to end on. So thank you to everybody here in person and on Zoom for all of your inspiration, and to my students, and thank you all.